Hello.
Okay, so as we went over last time, again, we just kind of want to review a little bit. But basically, there are these 4 different levels, and we kind of touched on tip of the yud, but we'll get into that in a moment. There's the lowest level He, or K as I wrote down, and that is reflective of receiving in order to receive, right? Which is still like a high level of understanding that even at that level of, wow, I'm only receiving to receive for myself. Like that's already a high level to be cognizant of that. And naturally, we're born with this level, right? If you think of a little tiny baby, right, in your arms, who's just like, they want mommy, they want to be changed, they want this, they want that, and they're receiving it just for themselves. Or that's our inherent nature. And it's not necessarily a bad thing in terms of like, oh, we think of it as like some like evil, disgusting thing, but it's more of recognizing that even just understanding that you're on that level is a high level in and of itself. Mm-hmm. The next is the Vav, which is giving in order to receive. And last time, I don't know if we touched on this too much, but it's really the stage of chinuch, right? The stage of education. When we're trying to get our children, right, to go from just being, like receiving for themselves alone and learning how to give to others. But, we still want them to, be nice to their siblings because we're going to give them a candy, right? That they're still going to be giving. They're still going to have that aspect of being giving, like how Kodesh Baruch Hu is giving. But you're doing well because it's for your benefit. You get the candy, you get the toy, you get the sticker, whatever motivates you. So that's kind of the stage of chinuch. So those are the 2 lower stages, the second half of Shem Havaya. And now we move into the first half of Shem Havaya. So the first He in Hashem's name is representative of giving in order to give. This is the level of a holy tzaddik. However, it's not fully complete, if that makes sense, right? There's still another level that we can get to, but this is a tikkun of creation, right? When we are on that level of just giving in order to give, we're not receiving at all for ourselves. We're just giving, right? We're making a tikkun for the creation where we're basically making a tikkun for the lower level He, if that makes sense. Then when we go to the yud, receiving in order to give, again, this is the purpose of creation. We talked a little bit about this last class with the Ramchal and Derech Hashem, right? About how if Hashem wants to be the giver to us, we have to be able to receive and then be like Hashem in our giving. However, though, that's a very difficult thing to do, Lamaisa, because of course it's so in our nature to want to receive from Hashem and only receive it for ourselves. So we have to go through these levels of giving in order to receive and giving in order to give in order to be able to do this lo lishma, just for its own sake. Then we kind of touched on this last class, but again, it's only the tip of the yud, so we just need to touch on it. That's a bad pun. But basically, within Shem Havaya, right, you'll notice that the yud itself kind of has like this extra tip on it, and it's not really in the levels of giving and receiving. What we understand this is Hashem's desire to give goodness to creation, and from here, all of the levels of giving and receiving come forth. So that's just kind of like Hashem's thought of creation and where Hashem is standing. And there are folks who could make it to this level, but again, we're kind of focusing on the first 4 levels because they're a little bit more practical as to how we can actually achieve them. I didn't know too, Amy, since you were here last time, if you had any questions from what we went over last time, or?
I do, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So the issue of the giving and receiving is that who's giving, who's receiving? I mean, I see that we're the ones giving and receiving, but from who? From Hashem? From other people?
It's a very good question. So there's some aspects of, obviously we always inherently sort of receive from Hashem inherently, right? The fact that we have a heartbeat says that we're receiving something from our Kodesh Baruch Hu. When you're in the level of giving in order to give, this is more about having it's more about the mindset that I have, right? That my mindset as a yid is that I want to give just in order to give to other people, or that I'm receiving for myself alone. It's more of the perspective of the person, but in terms of how their spiritual level is like within these 4 letters, if that makes sense. Like it's the perspective of the person as to are they being a giver or are they taking, But that taking at the highest level can actually be one of the most beautiful things, because you're taking from Hashem with the cognizance that you're taking so much in order to give to other people. So it's more the perspective of the individual. I didn't know if you wanted to follow up more with that, since he studies this literally all day long.
It's between two people.
Mm-hmm.
It's between two people, giving and give. It's between two people.
So that it's more about the interaction between us and other people.
And other people.
As opposed to
And
us
that
and
is
Hashem.
what, if you do good to other people, or anyone does good to me, that is, it means it's good, we are doing good to Hashem.
The Baal HaSulam says towards the end of this essay that there's really no difference between giving to people or Hashem. Meaning from our end, in terms of our refinement of self, our quality of trying to receive and give, is the same whether it's B'nadam l'makom or B'nadam l'chavera. But at the same time, Hashem, in His humility, prefers that we focus on B'nadam l'chavera. Because it's like a 2-for-1. Because Hashem's glory is within every person. Everyone has an Hashem, which is a chelik mimal, it's a portion on high. So to give to the other person is kind of a 2-in-1 in a sense, because that's Hashem's will, that His creation is gladdened. So if we gladden the person, we're also gladdening Hashem. And the receiving in order to give, like my wife mentioned, is the highest level, because not only can we receive His shefa in order to give to others, but in itself, receiving the shefa in a refined state is giving Hashem nachar ruach, because He wants to give us the shefa. The whole point of this is to refine ourselves so that we're able to receive non-egoistically, not for ourselves.
Right. And it's so important, though. I think something that I had to really think through time and time again, and how important it is to go through the stage of Vav and the first Hey of Shem Havaya in order to get to that point. Like, oh, of course you can receive in order to give, but it's so built within us that of course we just want to receive for ourselves alone, even if it's for our own honor or for our own dignity, right? You know, if you're blessed with tons and tons of money to give to a shul or to give to a hospital or give to a worthy cause, but you're really only doing it because you want your name on the yeshiva or on the hospital or on whatever, like you're still receiving for yourself alone, even though your action is very charitable and very giving to others. So
I think important to note that even the stage of giving to give, if someone does reach the level of a tzaddik or a tzaddikat, that doesn't mean they don't have the will to receive. They very much have the ratzon, if anything, larger than before. So we have the principle from Chazal: the greater we are, the greater Yetzer Hara. So the greater that we are in giving, so too our ratzon is greater. But that's not to say that it's a bad thing. Hashem actually wants us to grow our ratzon. Because the bigger our ratzon, the bigger our vessel, the more shefa we'll eventually be able to receive in order to give nachar ruach to Him. If someone wants the world, so to speak, if someone's like super go-getter, that's a good thing, because at some point, after the refinement, they're able to receive much more in order to give goodness.
So are we constantly moving between all of these levels?
In a way.
Or is it always towards?
On one side, it's static in the sense that a person is existing at a certain level in terms of their refinement. A person is at a certain level of light, which is corresponding to many parameters. There's sphirot, there's worlds, there's levels. So there is a static level, but at the same time, there's instances. It's like the notion that, and it says in Sefer Tanya, that the Rasha, the Benoni, and the Tzaddik are also relative. We can go through all three within a day many times over. So too here. But generally speaking, we're at a level, but we are also refining by being able to have those hints of giving and receiving properly.
Yeah. So if that's all the questions that you guys have, it's okay if you guys have more. But I just kind of wanted to do that review of last time, because I know for myself, like Chazara is very important, especially with this. It's kind of like, what is even going on? It feels like a little bit like, what is this Chinese? But it's Hebrew, but I don't understand it. No, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's more of the Chazara is very, very important. So we wanted to do a little bit of that. And then we now wanted to start on the second part of giving, Matan Torah, which is printed out for you guys right there. Right here. Okay. So to start, just make sure that I have my notes properly done here. Okay. So Hillel clearly said that loving the other is all of the Torah. Even if we could strain ourselves, by the way, this part here, just to review, this part here on the side is from the Baal HaSulam, and this is the Rebbe Setzal's, or sorry, the Rebbe Shlita. The Rebbe Shlita's, so the Rebbe Setzal, yeah, Rebbe Gottlieb Shlita, who sits over there. Now the Rebbe Setzal is the Rebbe after the Baal HaSulam, it's his son, and then there's Rebbe Gottlieb after him. So in my head, I'm like, Shlita, Setzal, they both have a sound. So my head gets a little confused. But so this is the original founder of our Hasidut, right? Like this is the Baal HaSulam. And then this over here is the Rebbe, the current Rebbe.
I'm sorry, can I ask again, like, I'm just trying to remember what we talked about last time. The Baal HaSulam lived how long ago?
He was born in 1886. He was Nifter in 54, some say 55. He was Nifter on Yom Kippur. Master the Ladder is a biography and it has a lot of teachings within.
It's the basic.
Okay.
Whoever wants to know about Baal HaSulam, first you read that book.
Then
You
you
can understand.
Okay. I just wanted to know the year more, but that's good. Now I get it.
No, but all the things, many of them, it's not so like, but it's very, very interesting.
Very good. Very interesting. So now we are Zohar to be able to learn a little bit the Baal HaSulam's statement here, where he's quoting kind of this famous pasuk that many of us who are connected to the from world in any way, shape, or form, I feel like this is like so ingrained within like any movement of Judaism, right? People talk about this pasuk all the time of what the Hillel the Elder is talking about, and I feel like there's this like extra meaning there that we don't always know about. So I'm excited to kind of dig in. Hillel clearly said that loving the other is all the Torah. Even if we could strain ourselves and find some way to settle the difficulty in the above statement, we have before us a second statement even more remarkable from Shabbat 31a regarding the prospective convert who came to Hillel and said to him, "Teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one leg." Hillel replied to him, "Whatever is hateful to you, do not do unto your fellow. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn." Here we have a clear pronouncement that nothing has more significance in all of the 612 mitzvot and all the verses of the Torah than the one commandment, and love your fellow as yourself, because they come only to explain and enable us to fulfill the commandment of and love your fellow as yourself to its full extent. For Hillel explicitly states, all the rest is commentary. Go and learn. That is, all the remaining contents of the Torah are an elucidation of this single commandment, and it is impossible to complete the commandment of and love your fellow as yourself without them. Right? So we're kind of talking about this interdependency of how this is the main principle of the Torah, and all the other mitzvot are dependent on this principle, and one without the other, you're not really completely fulfilling the whole of the Torah. So what's interesting to me is there's first line, right? Even if we could strain ourselves and find some way to settle the difficulty in the above statement. So oftentimes, right, my husband and I like to talk about how our current Rebbe is kind of like Rashi, right? Because he's kind of taking what the Baal HaSulam's writing and breaking it down and integrating things in a way that people can understand. And mamash, like there are times that there's just pages and pages of commentary on things that the Baal HaSulam has wrote on the Zohar itself. And it's like, whoa, like another level. So not only does that sort of feel like Rashi here, but it also feels like Rashi to me in what the Rebbe Shlita is about to say. So Rabbi Akiva said that this is a great claw. And indeed, he shows to be a general principle, but it still may not be unique, for there are other principles. This particular general principle might be seen to include as its particulars the interpersonal mitzvot, but not the mitzvot between each individual and God, right? So while it seems that this principle is kind of the Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, it doesn't really seem like it affects your Bein Adam L'Machoms. So therefore, the Baal HaSulam quotes Hillel's words to the convert, for it's explicit that indeed, and love your fellow as yourself is the general principle of the Torah. Then, after having brought the words of Hillel, we must interpret also that Rabbi Akiva has intended that love your fellow as yourself is the general principle of all the Torah. So this reminds me of like a lot of grammar Rashis back from the seminary days of is it a or the principle, right? And he's kind of saying that, okay, specifically looking at Hillel's words, this is the principle of the Torah, that there's no way that we can get around the fact that like this is the principle. This is the ikr of what it means to follow the Torah, is this specific principle. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the times we hear about this in Judaism, right, about how love your fellow as yourself. You see the bumper stickers around Eretz Yisrael. But like, what does that actually mean, Lamaisa? Right? Like, it's so nice to be like, yeah, we're going to like love people. We're going to care for people. We're going to be there. But like, what does that mean, Lamaisa? So now the Baal HaSulam kind of goes into, the Rebbe Shlita is going into what does this mean a little bit more practically here in comment 29. So there are two levels in the mitzvah of and love your fellow as yourself. Two levels for this consideration of the other person. The first, don't do to your friend what is hateful to you. And we usually fail to abide by this, which is very sad to read that, but alas, we often fail. For example, oftentimes we're preachy to others, although we wouldn't want them to preach at us, and no one wants to do what they are told unless they are told by a great person. The second, do for the other whatever will make him or her feel composed. These two levels parallel avoid evil, the negative, and do good, the positive. Right? Nobody ever wants to hear from like the negative individual of like, oh, like you need to do this or you need to fix this and you need to, or like whatever. The Rebbe Shlita is basically just going into that we don't want to abide by like, oh, we have to like go up and do something, right? And this is kind of what the Rebbe is going to go into here. That according to this, why did Hillel choose to present the convert the negative side of and love your fellow as yourself? That is, don't do to your friend what is hateful to you. Why didn't he tell him directly the positive side? One answer is that the negative side is more understandable, as it fits into the usual mindset. For anyone can appreciate that whatever is hateful to oneself is certainly not something that we should cause another. However, it's much more difficult to understand that I have to get up and do something for others the way I do for myself. And since we are dealing with a prospective convert who wants to take on the religion of Israel, Hillel started him out on the easy path. But he said to him, you've got to complete also the rest of the Torah. The rest of the Torah is an elucidation of this. Hillel relied on the light of the Torah to gradually show the convert the required development of an individual to get the complete realization of and love your fellow as yourself. So just to kind of bring it outside a little bit, what I think is very important to recognize here is in general, ladies, like it's easier to sit back and not do anything sometimes, to be told, okay, just like don't do anything hateful. Just don't do an action at this point, right? And I think that that's an important part of our spiritual work as well, right? Like when we're talking about these levels of going from receiving in order to receive, going through in order to eventually receive in order to give, it's so important that we learn how to be proper givers in order for us to be able to receive in order to give at this high level. Why do I think that kind of relates to this? Right here and what the Rebbe is talking about is because, of course, there are individuals who can automatically like take action, right? They automatically want to go out and do something and care for another. But it's important to realize that in that caring for another, you could be that person who's lashing out on someone who's kind of being like the nosy know-it-all into another person's business, right? It's so clear to me, especially that I think that kind of the principle from here that kind of relates to the levels of giving and receiving is that at first you just kind of have to sit back and like absorb, take it in, right? That we're not supposed to do evil into another person, and that we should be doing good, but we have to understand what the good means. And that's a part of going and learning and continuing our learning. But it's important to always have that key principle of loving the other as ourselves. Yeah. You want to add something?
The Baal HaSulam said that he said he wanted to just add and give oomph to the notion of loving the other. And he said that it has to be actualized. So what does it mean to really love the other? It means to give to them. So love your fellows yourself, okay, but what does it mean practically? So what we're talking about is giving, quite simply. What does that mean? Obviously, there's a lot of intricacies depending on the relationship, but
Right.
we should ask ourselves, what does the other person need? What are their needs? How can I fulfill them?
Right. And I think,
What's your question?
I wanted to say something that,
Yeah.
like you were saying, like you see the other person, you want to jump in and help and do something, but at the same time, not only do we need to first absorb, but I would think that we also need to do maybe a Shoshana nefesh. Like, what is my intention exactly? Am I giving tzedakah in order to put my name on the building? Am I giving this person help because I wanted to pat me on the back? Like, so it's not just absorbing, but I think the person also really needs to have a certain level of self-awareness as well.
Yeah, I think that's
we should always think, when he's giving, we should always think why I'm giving.
Exactly.
Why I'm giving. For what reason I'm giving it. This should be always in their conscious mind.
Of course.
Why I'm giving this.
And the Baal HaSulam says, just one who is even aware and makes that cheshbon nefesh and sees that, okay, my intention's not there. What can I do? I'm not a tzaddik. I'm not giving totally altruistically, but at least I'm doing the action. Just seeing that, having the awareness, is a tikkun in itself. And it's a first step to do more and slowly build to actually get that authentic intention. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's also very interesting that at first it's easier to be passive than active, but we're going to kind of go into that a little bit more. But that passiveness is actually an important part of the spiritual work at first, saying like, okay, I just need to sit here and absorb, right? Like I myself, like being a chotzer b'tshuva or a Baal tshuva, right? Like at first you kind of just have to sit and absorb like what the heck is going on. Like I couldn't just go and like help someone in a kosher kitchen because I just would have traded the whole thing up like immediately. But having to just sit and absorb is so important, especially with Hillel here, which for me personally, feeling like Hillel is being so on brand, starting him on the easy path, having that Hasidic caring side to him. He's saying that you need to, just kind of sit back and learn and absorb in order to be able to care for someone. But again, exactly as you're saying, Amy, like with the right intention and really for the other person. Regarding the convert saying, teach me all the Torah while I stand on one leg, there are many meanings. The simple meaning, teach me briefly the essential principle of the Torah, right? Like, I think that's generally what we kind of hear is like, the amount of time it stands to stay on one foot. Like, that's super pshat. The Torah. But there are other meanings, because like, welcome to Judaism. Human beings walk on two legs. One is called affliction. The other is called pleasure. For afflictions push us from one state to the next, and pleasures pull us toward them. Thus, the concept of walking is a physical illustration of the abstract concept of the transition from one state to another. In general, our development is dependent on our ability to operate with two forces, but the convert, in accordance with his nature as a novice, requests Hillel to teach only one side of and love your fellow as yourself, the more natural side. That's the idea of one leg. And that is the leg of afflictions, namely whatever afflicts you, don't do to your fellow, right? So it's easier for this potential convert to be a little bit more passive, right? To be pulled away from something instead of going towards it, because he has to have the knowledge and understanding of how to actually move forward positively. And again, that's kind of like just the ebbs and flows of life in general, where there are times where you have to sit back and you have to nourish your spiritual growth, and then there's times to move forward. And it's learning that balance throughout life. And it's not, like, oh, I've learned every single thing, and then you move forward. It's that walking throughout your whole life.
Yeah. One step forward, two steps.
Exactly.
Can you explain this idea better?
Of
the idea of
the legs?
Afflictions push us away. I think those last 2-3 sentences.
Sure. Do you want to explain?
Here, I feel like you did. Go ahead.
So, if one is in pain, they're inspired to change the situation. Say it's a matter of health, or it's a matter of mental, spiritual pain. We're inspired to shift. We're inspired to make the situation better. So relative to being pulled, the affliction is the leg that pushes. Pain pushes us. And pain is not bad. Pain is just pain. It's one of many things we go through in order to not only refine ourselves, build kalim, but to make that change. So in contrast, let's say, just for a Gashmias example, if I want a new car or a new home, if I want the pleasure of that new item, that pleasure pulls me forward. So it's a push and pull. It's this transition of states back and forth. Ideally, the ultimate pleasure we're trying to achieve in terms of our desire is the Vekut. We want union with Hashem. That's the ultimate pleasure. And there's levels of pleasures. There's different modalities, but like inanimate, plant, animal, speaking. And the Jewish desire, the deepest desire, is to be one with the Creator, to be one with Hashem. So, and that's done slowly but surely through the motions of both pain and pleasure. If it wasn't for our servitude in Mitzrayim, we wouldn't have had Gula. We need darkness to appreciate the light.
And additionally, too, the idea of standing on the leg of afflictions, right? We all understand that we have like ebbs and flows in our lives. We have setbacks and we have things that move us forward. A part of that leg of afflictions pushing you back is like, okay, I'm supposed to love someone as I love myself. Okay, I don't always like my setbacks, so I don't want to set anybody back. I at least, want to have like the doctor's code, whatever it's called, the do no harm. I at least want to do no harm, because that is like very pashut to understand. But how to give pleasure to someone else, that I kind of need to really work on. So that's it's just like a deeper illustration of that, and that the legs themselves are an illustration of the ebbs and flows of life.
And I think to note the end of what my wife said, that's the idea of one leg, and this is the leg of afflictions, namely whatever afflicts you, don't do to your fellow. And I think the depth of that is the notion of arvut, mutual guarantee, that we're all mutually responsible. We're in the same boat. If I afflict the other, in reality, I'm afflicting myself. So if I also benefit the other, I'm benefiting in the deepest way to contemplate all of reality. Also brings a beautiful example. Just you have a tiny seed, you put it on the scale, it's going to tip the entire scale. So to the smallest mitzvahs we do, even saying a shako, can tip the entire world to the side of merit, as Chazal says. So I think also the notion of the pleasure and the pain, as we refine ourselves, is to, in essence, attempt, as we see here with the levels, be more giving and be less receiving. And we see that in the insert in davening during the winter, in the first three brachos. We say, Mashiv Haruach Umar the Geshem, returns the wind and descends the rain. But the pnimius of that, the inner idea of that, Mashiv Haruach, Shev, return, Ruach, Ruchnias, return, realign, come to giving. Morid HaGeshem, Yored, descend, lower the Geshem, lower the Gashmias, lower the receiving. Because the Baal HaSulam says very simply, giving is spiritual, receiving is material, which means that one can put on tefillin, and if they want purely to receive for themselves alone, meaning I want reward in this world and the next, and I'm not thinking so much about Hashem and the benefit of humanity, that action can technically be 100% material. That's not necessarily a spiritual action. And this parameter is like a chiddush, because prior to this clear, like giving, receiving, that's what everything is about. Prior to that, you could say, well, no, the parameter is, it's a mitzvah, it's a holy thing, and it is. It definitely has the aspect of bringing light into the world. But relative to the idea of refining ourselves and where our intention is, it's not so pasha. We have to check ourselves and do that cheshbon nefesh, see where we're coming from.
Right. Additionally, I'll just finish up with this last paragraph here, and just a quick story before my husband kind of takes over to tell you all a little bit more about the modalities of the will to receive and some other really commentary, but just to kind of end off this short paragraph. Similarly, our sages say in Pesachim 50b, a person should not always learn even without pure intention. A person should always learn even without pure intention, lo lishma. That is, you should start with the side of the Torah that is more natural to you, while your direction should lift you up slowly from the nature of self-love, right? So that even if, some people say like, I just can't learn this. I'm not going to be doing it for the sake of Torah itself. But if you go from a point of saying, okay, but I want to be there, even the want to want is a holy, holy place to be. And it kind of makes me think too about sometimes also putting yourself in that situation where you want to love another person is really, really incredible to our spiritual work. And sometimes we don't always have a choice of this. And something that came up to me this week while preparing this class was, if either of you know Rebbitzin Esther Hamilton, she is an amazing Rebbitzin out of the UK and also has a really nice Instagram channel, just to put it out there. She's a very nice Instagram page where she does a lot of chizuk, a lot of Torah inspiration. And she actually once told a story about she got married. Her and her husband came to Eretz Yisrael for a year for him to learn. And in that year, a year after they got married, like Baruch Hashem, they had their first child. And at first, they had the baby. They even had the bris. It seemed totally fine. Then at day 10, all of a sudden, her brand new baby started having seizures. Please God, we shouldn't have such things, in our lives. This terrible, terrible thing of her baby started having seizures. And they took the baby to the hospital. They didn't realize that there were kidney problems with the baby. There were holes in the baby's heart. Don't ask me how this baby got discharged from the hospital initially. I have no idea. But essentially, listen, when she was going through this process of having this child in the hospital, right, having no idea how long it would last for, it lasted her 2 years of her son being in the hospital. And she thought to herself, oftentimes when we have a child, we also think of, okay, one day, there's going to be the bris, or, a pidyon ben, an upshurin, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, all these different things that give us nachas, right? And at the time, she had no idea if this baby was going to survive the next day. She just realized, I love this child just for my child existing, not even to give me nachas, that just because my child exists. And she really felt like she learned how to love through that experience. And I think that is such a powerful example. And I hope we don't ever have to go through something so traumatic for us to learn that. But the baby survived. Was in the hospital for 2 years and then survived. But still, I hope that we never have to go through something like that. But I think it really, really paints this powerful point that learning to give to another human, to give to another individual is so you never know when Hashem's going to throw you that opportunity to work on that. And hopefully it's not in such a difficult situation. But really, in that case, she just kind of had to be like, okay, I just love this child because this child exists and because. And I think that that's such a amazing illustration of how we, please God, should love all Jews in the world. Mm-hmm. And just be that loving, caring light of Hashem's light and really being Hashem's ambassador in this world. That, I might not receive anything from other people, but it doesn't matter because I want to be like Hashem and Hashem's giving to me. And how many times, am I taking from Hashem and I'm not really giving Hashem the right, gratitude, the right giving to Hashem. So it's an amazing story. But yeah, that I just thought kind of fit in well into this of whoa, just the power of love is more than, it's more than just a song by Huey Lewis in the news. Remember that from back in the day.
So I'll continue from here. Actually, the same convert also went also to Shammai, whose defining nature is the attribute of judgment that allows no compromise. When the convert put to him his request for compromise, one leg, Shammai pushed him off with his measuring stick, used for building, that was in his hand. For Shammai's building was founded on the basis of absolute truth. The translator adds that truth and measuring stick are spelled in Hebrew with the same letters. Regarding their intimate connection, not relative truth that adapts to a certain situation, as Hillel was representing.
It's measuring sticks, maybe?
I tried looking it up. I couldn't figure it out. I mixed and matched all the letters of Emet, and
Right.
I couldn't find it.
Measuring stick.
And it's not in there either because this is the commentary. This is just the word of the Baal
fine.
HaSulam. Yeah.
Okay. Thought let me go to the original Hebrew. Might be a more ancient word. Well, emet is aleph mem tav.
Well, it's probably Aramaic. Could be.
Oh, Aramaic.
I assume, yeah. If it's
Yeah, because the aleph is probably at the end.
yeah,
I'm
it could
guessing.
be. This is actually the description in the Midrash in which our sages teach, in the beginning, the Holy One, blessed be He, created the world with an attribute of judgment. He saw that the world was not viable this way, so he brought forth the attribute of mercy and combined it with the attribute of judgment. From Midrash Rabbah, Bereshit 12:15, also Rashi's commentary on God created in the first verse of the Torah. The story of the convert illustrates the saying of our sages. For in the beginning, the convert comes to Shammai, that is, he tries to convert on the basis of the aspect of din, judgment. But after he sees that this is not viable, that is, that he cannot receive direction from this sort from the start, then he turns to Hillel, who represents the combining of the aspect of mercy with the aspect of judgment, by virtue of his willingness to accept a relative truth that matches an individual's spiritual state. The example I like to bring for this relative truth is the Kiruv group. Myself having been part of a Kiruv program when I went to yeshiva the first time, and seeing this dynamic now. If a kid, let's say, is on a 3-week Kiruv trip to Israel, and they're doing some type of Torah learning, and he's yelling to the rabbi from across the base midrash, "Rabbi, come and help me." From our understanding, that's not kavadik, we need more deference for our scholars. For that individual, relative to where they're holding, that was a mitzvah. For them to call a rabbi to ask a question on Torah, which they might not have done once in their life up to that point, it's a huge thing. I'm saying for myself today, if I was to do such a thing, relatively speaking, it would be an avera. So relative to this convert, he had to come to Hillel to get the relative truth as opposed to the pure MS of the din. But here we're going to go into one of my favorite parts of Matan Torah, my favorite concepts that Torah's Ashlag likes to illuminate and likes to look through the lens of, is Torah de Rishut HaYachid. So let's continue. According to Torah de Rishut HaYachid, the method of interpretation sees all aspects of the Torah as descriptions of the inner workings of the individual soul. Meaning to say, every place, person, every city, every description in Tanakh is describing us. The Torah is literally a story about you and I. Everything is a state of being. Everything is a transfer. Everything are aspects. We all have inner avos, inner emos, so on and so forth, and inner paro, inner nimrod, inner chule chule.
That's a uniquely Ashlag concept? Or
It's common in Hasidus too, but Ashlag expounds plenty on it. Yeah,
that's what it's called, the Rishut Hayaki?
right. Like the rishus of inner domain, the individual domain. When we want to be converted, that is to undergo a transformation from the character of a non-Jew to the character of a Jew, we must turn to the Hillel within ourselves. Each of us, Jew and non-Jew alike, are born with an inclination to receive for ourselves, referred to as the non-Jew within us. And each of us has the potential of developing an inclination to give to others, referred to as the Jew within us. Rabbi Gottlieb is interpreting the encounter of Hillel and the convert as instruction regarding the manner of converting the non-Jew within to become a Jew within. So too, when we have the aspect of being a light unto the nations, we want to be a holy nation. First and foremost, we have to be holy unto our own inner nations. We are told that we have 70 nations within, 70 aspects of our will to receive that we have to correct. And we have the spark of Israel. Israel is a code word for a spiritual state of being, Yashar Kel, straight to God. Meaning if we reach the holy land of Israel in our inner being, if we make it to Israel, meaning we're giving to give, we're lishma, we're for the sake of heaven. In the meantime, we're attempting to bring these nations into Yashar Kel. We're correcting these inner nations and being a light unto our inner nations. And like the famous saying, if you want to fix the world, fix yourself. So doing such a thing and fixing ourselves, by definition, is going to send waves of Shef and Tikkunim into the whole world. Same way if you have a single drop on the side of merit, elevates the whole world. How much more so if we get closer to reaching this level of a tzaddik or a tzaddikah. So these are co-words, because every person, even non-Jews, have the non-Jew and the Jew within. This is not a sensitivity of like labeling Goy, Jew. This is inner aspects of ourselves that every human being on the planet has within themselves. But to clarify, even a Jew who keeps Torah and mitzvot and is careful with seemingly insignificant details, as long as he or she has not arrived at, quote, and love your fellow as yourself, which is dependent on advancement in Emunah, then he or she is nonetheless still considered a non-Jew. Of course, Rabbi Gottlieb is writing from the point of view of inner meaning. He is not contradicting the approach of Jewish law. Thus, the inner meaning of the symbol of a non-Jew and the symbol of a Jew is that a non-Jew does only what accords with natural self-concern, and nothing out of love for the other. And also he or she does only what accords with reason, and nothing on the basis of Emunah. Whereas a Jew is one who becomes merciful and giving towards the other, and is able to operate on the basis of Emunah. Thus, we are not discussing a historical story, but a description of a spiritual process that each individual must undergo, for everyone must want to undergo this conversion. Everyone must want to turn to the Hillel within, which is the potential point of holiness within each person. Each of us must connect with that point, reveal its light, and begin to live according to the principles of that point. I think it's important to note holy. What is the potential holiness? As we know, like if we were to sanctify something for the Beit HaMikdash, we're separating it. Kadosh comes from the root of separation, something distinct, something unique. So relative to our inner work, what does it mean to be holy? We are distinct from our will to receive. We're holy because we're separated from our ego. We're elevated to a place of godliness, of giving, loving, being compassionate, so on and so forth. In contrast to our born nature, which the Kabbalah describes as our chomer, our natural raw material, just as Adam was made out of chomer, so to speak, out of clay, out of the dirt, out of earth, meaning to say, even he was made out of this pure desire, because all of creation is desire. Chomer is the same letters of chamor, of donkey. So when Chazal tell us that we're born a wild donkey, it's meaning to say that our born nature is of chomer. Our raw material is that of animalistic, meaning we receive for ourselves. We're born with the goyish nature, so to speak, this code word meaning self-serving, and we're attempting to reach the status of a Jew. So obviously, halachically speaking, we're Jewish. But the bitter truth here is that in the deepest sense of the word, we're trying to become Jewish. Because the Jew in the deepest sense of the world, to be in Yisrael, is to be Yashar Kel, is to be Lishma, is to reach to these high levels of holiness.
I'd also kind of add to that point too, that oftentimes we're talking about coding within the Torah, but we also have an understanding that like halacha lamaisa is still important, and that, you know, all these things physically are still so important. You know, a non-Jew still isn't going to like open a bottle of wine for us, even if they're at a high level, more than like a halachically Jewish person. Like there's still halacha lamaisa that comes into play. I feel like I'm the gavura sometimes. That's like very, you know, like okay, there's still halacha lamaisa. What we're saying is that we truly believe that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is putting these spiritual principles into the world through the physicality, for something that we can physically understand, for us to be able to teach us a spiritual lesson. So it means that we have the idea of Jews. We are a goy kadosh, right? We are supposed to be the light unto the nations, Hashem's chosen people, right? Chosen to be representatives of Hashem in this world. But it doesn't mean that there are non-Jews who cannot reach a holy purpose. They just reach that purpose within the confines of the Noahide laws and of other teachings that are specifically meant for their specific spiritual tikkun. It doesn't mean that like you're like a bad person or anything like that. Myself having non-Jews like in my own family, it doesn't mean that they can't like reach a high spiritual state. And for us too, our spiritual state is like just another level of avoda in terms of really digging into Tanakh, really digging into each part. But again, it's not there to conflict the view of Jewish law that like someone's halakhically Jewish based on either their mother's Jewish status or a conversion. So like, just to make that very, very clear, that there's the halakha l'maaseh still is so important because it physically illustrates to us physically within the world, but it's not just supposed to just stay physical. It's also supposed to reflect our inside as well.
Body and soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Do either of you have any questions before we...
Okay. So number 30 is commenting on the end of the paragraph. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn. That is, all the remaining contents of the Torah are an elucidation of the single commandment. It is impossible to complete the commandment of love your fellows yourself without them. So Margalit says here, it is possible to arrive at loving the other only if there is a foundation, preparation, and building by means of the rest of the mitzvot. And this is the only way to understand and love your fellow as yourself, and to get to that state where we can fulfill it. The upshot of the matter is that we have no freedom to substitute or change any Torah or rabbinic mitzvah, or even the slightest bit of some custom founded by the great teachers of Israel. For this entire web, when taken together as a whole, is meant to change us. It is a divine document that cannot be tampered with. It must be fulfilled in all its forms and levels in order to arrive at a spiritual uplifting above the prison of the desire to receive and toward the freedom of love of the other. So too, Mitzrayim is a code word also for our ego, the tsar, the constrictedness, the narrowness. So you'd see at Mitzrayim is to leave the status of the ego, to leave this prison of self-concern, of self-service, and to go towards Yashar Kil, to go towards being straight to Hashem. A parable for this: someone builds a building, and the building is made of many parts: the foundation, the pillars, the bricks, electrical tubing, etc. Each part with its particular official standard of quality. That is, a certain accepted standard that the contractor must abide by. If the contractor begins to change things according to the contractor's understanding, which means according to the contractor's own interest, woe to whoever would live in that building. Thus, Baal HaSulam states here that all of the Torah and all of its mitzvot, all its sections, stories, and legends, all exist for the sake of transforming our nature, from the nature of self-love to the nature of loving the other. The Torah comes to explain to us this idea on the level of thought and to cultivate a mental transformation, but it must conclude with a transformation also in our behavior.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Transforming our nature from the nature of self-love to the nature of loving the other. It sounds like you're saying that self-love is something that we need to get rid of in order to move to loving the other. But and I understand, because we understand self-love to be a selfish thing, but and receiving, which is what we're trying to move away from. But at the same time, when he says that kamocha, in order to get to the point of loving the other, you have to start with kamocha, with self-love.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's going to talk about that later, but that's something that, I don't know, just
You have to love thyself.
jumps
First
out
of
at
all.
me. Yeah.
True.
You have to love yourself,
Exactly.
first of all,
Right.
to whatever deeds you do, first of all, you should know what you like about yourself. You should understand yourself. First, think about yourself, what you like. What do you like? Whatever you like, that you do to the others. And whatever you don't like, don't do to the others.
Right.
But you should know what you like and what you don't like.
Yes.
First of all,
So you're saying that that's what he means by that. But here, when he said transforming,
it's our nature that we like
this we're
ourselves.
rejecting with the intention of going here. But what I'm saying is maybe the two need to coexist as opposed to leaving this one behind.
In essence, that is the highest level.
Highest level.
Highest level is the coexistence. It's 100% receiving, 100% giving.
Yeah.
It's a pellet. It's a wonder that we could do both at the same time. So it's true. I think the point of difference is like to contrast, to speak about maybe philosophies elsewhere, because there's a lot of self-love literature in the world. There's a lot of self-empowerment in the secular world. It's very popular. Understandably so. People want to work on themselves intrinsically because they have that chelik mimal. They have this core spark within that wants to be in the Vegas with Hashem. So that in essence is still self-serving. It's still for oneself alone. I don't think the notion of loving oneself is necessarily egoistic intrinsically if it's coming from the framework of Shem made me. Shem loves me absolutely. Of course I have to love myself. If I didn't, I would be saying something, I'd be speaking Lashon Hara against Hashem in essence. So it's true. It's a foundation. It's very much so. And to the point of that being our born nature, like receiving to receive, children should also be imbued with a sense of self-confidence and self-love. And then slowly but surely to understand that that's coming from a holy place of their neshama, their chelik mimal. But to focus on the giving, of course, receive what they need in life, because the Baal HaSulam says receiving our necessities is not called receiving oneself alone. Eating, sleeping, we all need what we need. But for example, I want a piece of cake. So I make a cheshbon. I can eat 20% of this cake in order to be of service to God. If I eat any more, it's really for myself. He made this cake. It's for me. I have the option. I can make a bracha on it. I can enjoy it, meditate on it. It tastes so good. Hashem gave me these amazing taste buds. 20%. And the rest, I'm deflecting, so to speak. I'm deflecting the rest of the cake. And Hashem gets nachat ruach for me making that cheshbon and saying, I'm taking this much in order to be giving to Hashem, because I can only take this much in order to be giving. And the rest, I can wait. So too, in all of our life, we have these, whether it's halacha or any type of relationships that we have where we need to practice gevurot and have parameters. The power of saying no is also, can be chesed in itself.
Mm-hmm. I'd also kind of add to, just to kind of give a little like tinge into like future classes, and just to kind of the Baal HaSulam's theory of how this works, Lamaisa. Because he's saying that we have to transform this from just, a mental thought exercise of, oh yeah, I want to give to others, I want to be more loving, I want to be more giving, into what we do, into our behavior. And something the Baal HaSulam talks about is, it is important to love myself. And imagine though, if we all lived in a society where I'm constantly thinking about like 10, 20 closest people in my kahila, and they also are thinking about me, of like, oh, you know what, this person's like birthday is coming up in a few weeks, and I know that they like have a crazy busy schedule. Maybe I should do something nice for their birthday. Maybe this, maybe that. Like if we're always thinking of giving to others, we actually actualize our ability to love ourselves even more. Because I'm thinking about other people in my community, right? I'm thinking about others around me. And there's also 20 people who are also thinking about me constantly. So it's the idea of, sometimes we kind of have this isolated, like, it's all for myself. Like self-love is like just for me, and I need to figure out, think about when Corona hit and everyone was like taking all the toilet paper from the stores because they were like afraid that they were like never going to look at a piece of toilet paper ever again, right? And self-love versus having the idea of, okay, how much do I realistically need? How much does my neighbor need? Like having that type of mindset, you actually have more of your needs fulfilled, is the theory of the Baal HaSulam, is that we have like a better functioning society if we all have that mindset of how do we give to another person. And I think too that it's also the idea of transformation, right? It's not the idea of completely get rid of it. It's transforming it into a way that it's actually used positively. But of course, it is important to love ourselves, to care for ourselves, like as a part of that process, which I think is also a part of the passiveness, right? That you should do what feels natural to you initially when you're starting to learn more about something, right? You know, I only know of one story of someone who became frum because they kept Tisha B'Av, the fast Tisha B'Av. It's very interesting, but I would say for the average non-frum Jew coming into Yiddishkeit, probably Tisha B'Av is not the entry point, or any fast day for that matter, being like, oh, why am I not eating right now? You know, having a nice Shabbos meal might be a better introduction for them. Or going to a class that helps inspire them, to help them grow. That's the beginning, but it's more of learning to look outside of yourself in that development, and how we end up having a better society, and we end up like being able to actually fulfill our tikkun and our purpose of creation. So that's all that we kind of had planned for now. Do either of you have any follow-up, anything you want to say? No, it's good. It's also good too. We also will, again, do a review of this at the beginning of next class. But again, the modalities of the will to receive that are on here, right? We're going from this level. We don't talk so much about animal, vegetative, inanimate, but going specifically from intellectual, right? From just the level of me to bear, the level of speaking, which is also kind of a code for like a non-Jew spiritually. We're not talking about a non-Jew in the world. Going from that to the godly, or the Yehudi, that we're becoming Yisrael, Yashar Kale, right? Straight to Hashem. And what does that mean for us, right? And specifically in this class, we're talking the context of Jewish individuals, and what does that mean for us having the Torah? Again, the whole essay is called Matan Torah. So how do we really receive it? So thank you guys so
There's
much.
a lot to say on these modalities, but we'll go into it more in the
Yeah.
future.
And one bite of the cake at a time. Yes, of course.
Thank you so much.
And also, if you want to get any of these Sfarim here to have your own personal copy, you're welcome to. You're welcome to take one. There is a cost, but you know the cost better than I know the cost.
The smaller ones to the right, there's a blue, red, and white. I can explain them. Those are 30 shekel. The giving is 100, and Master Ladder, which is the biography with additional teachings inside, is 120. Spiritual Principles is the yellow one. It's like a very bekitzer of Avodas Hashem, written by Rabbi Gottlieb, basically talking about a lot of these principles. Very simple language, step by step, receiving, giving, emunah, consciousness. Very straightforward. My rabbi from Yeshiva, actually, he takes guys to Tzfat, and he brings them to my friend Abraham Lowenthal, who has the mystical art studio, Kabbalah art. He's been a student of Rabbi Gottlieb for 12, 13 years. He's been doing birthright groups for over 20 years. Most birthright groups go to him. He gives like an intro to Kabbalah lecture, talks about his journey to Tshuva and stuff. And Abraham Lowenthal. Yeah. And I myself went there when I went on birthright 5 years ago now, actually. And it was extremely powerful. And people are very much moved by what he has to say. And those 3 books are his translations, actually, of Rabbi Gottlieb. And the most popular one is the red one. They're just nuggets of wisdom. It's like 2-3 quotes to a page. It's translated in English. It's very nice. There is some type of seder to it, but it's really just flip to any page and read quotes. And that's most popular by even potential people doing tshuva from like his kiruv groups and his birthright groups in general buy that. And they love it. They connect to it. It's got like a unique language in terms of giving, loving, and focusing on these ikarim that are unfortunately forgotten a lot in Judaism. The blue one is more of an introduction to the actual system of Kabbalah. It's called Peticha by the Baal HaSulam. It's the first 2 chapters. It's a 20-chapter book. It's quite detailed with lots of commentary, but it has the English translation as well as the commentary by Rabbi Gottlieb, because the Peticha was also written by Baal HaSulam. And then Giving, of course. Master Ladder was one of my favorite books. It's very nice.
If we're not ready to buy it, do you know if there's a place where we could borrow it?
I have copies.
We do have some.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Happy to ask us. We're happy to.
Yeah.
So if it's not,
Not at all. So
Yeah,
if there's a particular one you'd like, I might have it on hand here, because I have.
I'll ask my husband. I think one of them I thought I saw in our house. It could be that my husband borrowed the yellow one. But I'll ask him
So
Okay.
because
Totally.
he's
get it.
all new. And he's more.
The small, the blue one costs how much?
30.
30.
Yeah.
I don't have only that blue one. I have no other ones.
Yeah.
If we're just starting out, the blue one would be the way to go.
If one wants an introduction to the actual system, if they actually want the learning of Kabbalah Mamish, like learning about the Sefirot and the worlds, and also its relation to us, because all of it has to do with inner work, then that's a good intro. A book that's not here that I would recommend even more so is the Introduction to the Zohar by the Baal HaSulam. The English translation is also by Yedida Cohen, who wrote the biography. It's called Tapestry for the Soul. She has additional commentary in between the Baal HaSulam's paragraphs. She has journal entry questions. She makes it so personal. It's a very, very sweet book. And it goes into...
You can go to Neora Press.
Who?
NeoraPress.com. You have
Neora.
Neora.
the Holy
Yeah.
Press.
It's here. I can write it in the group. NEHORA. Yeah. .com.
Mhm.
I didn't know if it was a .com, .co, .il.
Nahora Press.
And if you
Nahora.
want,
And
on Thursdays,
press, like a publication
on
press.
Thursdays you can also join. She also teaches Kabbalah and all the stuff in English. She writes in Hebrew and she explains it in English.
Mm-hmm. Right here.
Zoom.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you can also to YouTube also.
It's really cool. It's very, very cool. We joined it before.
Very,
Very,
very
very
interesting.
cool.
I think I have to start slow
Oh, of course.
and let it sort of sink in.
Oh, of course. Are you kidding me? I remember my husband and I were first dating, and I was like, everything's Chinese. I tried reading Giving. He gave me a copy while we were dating, and I was like, it's all in English, but it looks like Chinese to me. I was so confused. It took me so long of sitting with my husband every day at breakfast, just going over simple, literally it takes a long
Yes.
time to go into all. No,
This
it
is
takes
the one.
Yeah, this is the one that I recommend most. It's like an
She always talks on inner meanings of Torah and Kabbalah and all those things.
It's got a...
This is your copy, or this is the show
basement
copy?
copy.
Yeah, this is your copy.
Huh?
I have to order from this, Nvidia. You don't have it?
I think we have these in the warehouse.
Do you have it in the warehouse? I want to buy it.
I didn't see it today. I was looking for this. I grabbed all these from the warehouse today. I did not see this.
Tapestry, I think it's not there.
HaSulam Rav Ashlag is the Baal HaSulam.
It's got a HaSulam on the back from Rabbi Lower Jonathan Sachs. That's all.
Oh, wow. So the Rebbe's itself, what was his name?
The Rebbe Zitzal was the Baal HaSulam's first son and successor. It's Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag. Baruch Shalom. He also wrote commentaries on Baal HaSulam. Had his system of all his commentary on the Sefer of the Arizal called Talmud Esrei Sefirot, as we mentioned in the first class. And his son clarified it more, so that's a major commenter on the entirety of it. But he's
This is a
That's the email address.
yeah. That's a email address.
I see that it says here Nahora Press over here.
Yeah, you have that also.
Yeah.
You can take this Neora at designated.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
If you want to, it's an Israeli time. It's 7:30 p.m. in the evening on Thursdays. Every Thursday she has it.
on Zoom, right?
That's interesting. Okay. That's good to know. I don't know if I'll be able to do that.
Give me, you can watch later on the YouTube
Mm-hmm.
too.
Okay, so I should contact them for that?
I will send, give me your number.
Okay.
On Thursday, I will send you the Zoom
The Zoom link.
link, and if you can, or you can afterwards, you can go on the just on the YouTube, get it applied,
Okay.
and you can do it.
Are you in the WhatsApp group that you created? So I'm in there.
You are in the WhatsApp group of
The
Levita?
WhatsApp for the English share.
For the
Ah,
English
yeah.
share.
Yeah, do you want me to add you?
I'm not.
Huh?
I'm not.
Oh,